Welcome to the Dialogue Web Extra. I'm Bruce Reichert. 15 years and almost 650 programs. That's pretty impressive in the world of television. And I'm here with the two co-hosts of Dialogue's show, Marcia Franklin, Joan Cartan Hansen. Thank you, ladies.
First of all, Bruce, I have to say you are really scaring me with this outfit.
Just sitting there, it's taken us 15 years to get you on a live set.
Yeah,
I used to look like this all the time when I covered the legislature.
Really spiffy.
Back to you. Your hour-long 15th anniversary show must have brought back some wonderful memories.
Yeah, it was. It was nice to go back and see the wide variety of work. I mean, Marcia and I have done 650 shows over 15 years. It's incredible the difference and the way the state has changed and the way the people have changed and the marvelous stories.
It was really hard to narrow everything down because there's so many programs to choose from and so many interesting moments, and just to select some was probably the most difficult part of it. Although, looking back on some of the haircuts that we had and sets that we had.
And the outfits we still have.
Yes, the outfits that we still have.
That's why I wear hats. Doing a live statewide call-in show maybe looks easy to folks watching, but you folks know better than anyone. It doesn't always work. Sometimes there are disasters, and sometimes all the folks in the back can't save you.
It's like a duck paddling on the water. The duck's going smooth, but everything underneath is just like going like this. And the biggest disasters we've had are power ones, where the power goes off. Well, when the power goes off, everything goes off. So you're sitting in a dark studio and you can't proceed. You can't do anything because you're still live. If the power comes back on, you come back on live television. So you're constantly warning the guest, be careful what you say, because you may all of a sudden be saying it on statewide television.
Marcia, any disasters?
Fortunately, I haven't had any power outages. There's probably a semi-disaster in the waiting every time I do a program now, because my memory is getting to the point. It was like, who is there? What are your names again? No, I'm just kidding. Probably the hardest thing, especially now that we've moved to digital transmission between our remote sites, has been this earbug that's in my ear. A lot of inputs are coming in now. So you'll have the guest from up north, and sometimes there's a delay. Sometimes you can hear yourself talking in your own ear. You'll have the phone calls coming in your ear. You'll have the director talking to you in your ear. And there have been some times where I've just kind of gone, I think we call it brain freeze or something like that, where it's just too much coming in. But fortunately, no power outages.
No power outages, but it couldn't happen without the people behind the scenes, because that's, I mean, you see us on the air.
Right.
But it really doesn't happen without all the crew.
Well, this is a good segue to show folks some of the people behind the scenes. Okay.
We get a phone call, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
This is production control. This is where programs get directed from. Directing a program is like directing an orchestra with no sheet music and all the orchestra members in blindfolds. I say that because when I'm directing a program, I'm the only one that can see with all the monitors everything that's going on.
Arnold, what?
Reset again, something else.
We've implemented this on help regulate.
Yes, I sure can.
When you walk in the door, if you say something.
I have a view of all my materials I can go to, and I'm the only one that can see that.
Did Kill a Wolf was Robert Millett. He is from up north in the Kenai area, and he was featured.
You're basically calling out camera calls, movements for the cameras. You're directing people in Moscow, Pocatello, cueing your character generator operator to bring up a font or map. Trying to watch 3-4 cameras, maybe up to 8 cameras while you're directing a show. We're fortunate that Murdoch funded a grant that built the HD plant that we have now, and that we're able to provide high definition programs to the peoples of the state of Idaho. So you can see every wrinkle and every out of place hair on somebody's face and body. I am so happy I'm on this side. It's amazing what high definition shows and what it doesn't hide.
makeup for television has changed when we moved into high definition. Before we used what was a pancake makeup or a fairly thick makeup because the lights were so bright and the cameras were so bad that you needed the makeup to look human. Now with high definition, it's the opposite problem. Thick pancake makeup will show up on camera like you're wearing a lot of stuff. And so we've moved to high definition makeup, which is airbrush makeup.
So Joan is really good with the airbrush makeup. I am not. I think that I would probably put graffiti on myself. So I just do it the old-fashioned way. High definition is a pretty scary thing because it shows every flaw. But, oh well. Secret weapon. It's kind of hard to stay awake for a program that starts at 8:30 sometimes, so have to have a little help.
Well, I think the biggest concern I have about the current hunt is just a matter of fair chase.
This is one of the hardest things I think about being on television is when you have to wear one of these in your ear and continue thinking and talking while a director's talking to you, or while you're hearing a phone call through your ear, or while you're hearing a guest from a remote location. It can really warp your brain to try and do too much while you have one of these in your ear and somebody's talking to you.
James, headset. Jared, tape.
Right, because the audio coming to her is different than the audio going into the encoding.
Why don't you grab the phone?
Headset.
Yes, sir.
Kill mics. Track 5.
Last shot.
Roll it. Rolling. 7,
Very good. Good work.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
And 2 by Q.
Coming up, some say it's about time, but still doesn't go far enough. Others see it as a potential calamity. Next on Dialogue, we talk about Idaho's first legal wolf hunting season and take your calls. Stay tuned.
Back to tape. 3, 2, 1. Whatever.
Last out, correct?
What's that?
Last out.
I'll count you out. It'll be 3, 2, 1, and then 3 out. No trailing out on that. And 3, 2, 1, and 2 by Q.
So I have to ask each of you, do you have a favorite show?
You know, it's really tough. It's like picking your favorite child because some shows you can forget. Those are the easy ones. Those are the children you don't want to remember. But there have been some marvelous moments with, you know, wonderful people like Stephen Ambrose and David McCullough. And then there are those shows that take you by surprise where you take on an issue and then the next day someone stops you in the grocery store and said, that really made me think, or that made me, and you're like, yes, you know, so there have been a lot of those kind of marvelous moments.
So sometimes you don't know right away that
No.
it's been a great show, but the feedback tells you.
Next day.
Marcia?
You know, one of my favorite shows was a conversation I had with Doris Kearns Goodwin, the historian. It almost felt, I never was much into sports. I wasn't very good at athletics. But I imagine this would be what it felt like if you were in a game and somebody's throwing you a pitch and you're hitting it and then you throw it and somebody hits it. It felt just a really good back and forth between the two of us. And I really, really enjoyed speaking with her. I've spoken with her twice. And then when we're able to get additional money and put some videotape into our shows, and I'm thinking of one I did on Islam in Idaho, where we were able to put in a taped piece. I really enjoy those programs because it's nice to have that video in there. And I agree with Joan, one of the most pleasant aspects of my job is our viewers. And they do come up to you and they do let you know. Even I was at the doctor's office once, you know, and somebody's like, oh, I saw that program with the Mexican consul. You know, who is he? And tell me more about him. So that's very, very satisfying.
And Marcia should also, you know, your Iran programs, the Spirit of Iran, were really fascinating. It was a window into a world that we don't get to necessarily see here. And I
Thank you.
really appreciate those, and I really enjoyed of the video programs, the one on Vernon Baker. That was an exceptional moment to be there in history, to see that man recognized, to receive that those men all received the Congressional Medal of Honor. So.
And there are clips from these programs that we
In the-
just mentioned,
yep.
the Debt of Honor, the Iran and Islam, in the 15th anniversary show.
Well, these are all some of my favorite shows too, but as you all know, I've told you more than once, my favorite shows are when you get guests around the table who disagree adamantly, either on property taxes or bear baiting or wolves or mining or whatever, and you have to be the referee.
Air traffic control.
Air traffic.
You know, my
yeah.
first rule is nobody hurts the host. That's the first thing I tell them.
I imagine that there has to be a certain art to taking a live call from a viewer and working it into the show seamlessly so that it advances the concept that you're hoping to send forth.
There is. We talked to the phone screener ahead of time about some of the calls that might come in and making sure that they're balanced and appropriate. But you really, you never know. I mean, I've actually had somebody say, well, do you think you'll get a call on this? And I'm like, well, I wish I had a crystal ball, but I don't know. And yes, when we do look down, we can see kind of the layout of the calls, and you want to wind them in so that they don't take you too far afield, and so that you can move the conversation the way that you'd like to move it. But I also like to go back to what you said about the controversial programs. There's a clip in the 15th anniversary from one we did years ago on the militia movement, and with former Sheriff Vaughn Killeen and a member of the militia movement. And it was so interesting that both agreed to appear, because sometimes guests don't want to sit with their opponent. And boy, that was a rousing debate about the militia movement and Sheriff Killeen's concerns about it. So those programs can be very interesting, and sometimes you just have to sit back as a host and say, okay, go for it.
Well, and the nice thing about dialogue is that we do set the stage for a civilized discussion.
Yes, that's right.
And
That's true.
we don't set out to set the people against each other. What we really want to do is try and inform people and help give each side a chance to really
Right.
discuss their point of view. So sometimes people will come on a dialogue where they won't go on somewhere else because they know they can trust us to set a platform and allow for a civilized discussion.
There's not a lot of yelling on dialogue, and not a lot of heat. We want to shed light. I mean, really. And actually, we did a program in the last year on the Oahe Wilderness, where we had all these stakeholders from around the table who used to be arguing with each other, who came together. And many other TV shows might not take on something like that. They'd only want the heat, you know. But it's an important story when people can actually agree and come to consensus on something controversial too. We think it's a story as well.
I imagine in 15 years of being on the air with Dialogue, there have been some recurring themes and some recurring guests. I'm curious who holds the record. Who's been here the longest or the most?
Well, you know, I've looked back a little bit out of curiosity on that, and I think that it is Representative Mike Simpson, either appearing by himself to talk about congressional activity, or in a context such as talking about the Boulder White Clouds legislation, or recently we had him on talking about the federal stimulus package. Governor Batt was also very generous with his time on Dialogue. I remember at first he didn't want to come on Dialogue because of the phone calls. And he said, "You're not going to take any calls from those fish people, are you?" I said, "Well, Governor, I can't, tell people not to call in." Well, when it was over, he wanted to keep going. He really, really enjoyed it. And I will say, Joan, you're hosting a program soon. By the time this airs, it will have passed, with Wayne Hammond, the budget chief.
Yeah.
3 times this year he's been on. So I think he would hold the record for the guest in 1 year that's been on the most. And that shows you that we've been concentrating a lot on the economy.
Mr. Hammond, Mr. Batt, Mr. Simpson are all great guests. What do you do when the guest is not so great and he just or she just freezes up?
You know, knock on wood. We haven't had anyone just totally freeze, because I have. You have.
Sort of,
Well,
yeah.
I've had people go to the point where they give one-word answers,
Oh. Well,
which is almost as bad, because you're like, okay, that took 2 seconds, and I've got 30 minutes of program.
Actually, Governor
and
Batt was
like-
kind of like that too. I had a list and he went through it.
And like, okay, that can be bad, but I've never had anybody actually freeze.
I've had 2 guests, I will not name them, both of whom were in pretty high positions that you would think, they wouldn't. One was in the bathroom for a very long time before they came out and went on the air, and I was getting quite concerned, and it was white as a sheet. And I think really what Joan and I both do is we meet with our guests, if at all possible, on the phone or in person beforehand, and then definitely we ask them to come before the program and sit down, and we just kind of run over everything with them. And then we bring them out on the set before the show for about 15 minutes. And I really do think that helps, so that by the time the cameras turn on, they are more relaxed. We have found an interesting phenomenon, though, with the web, getting into the web. We tape these web extras sometimes after the program. They're still being recorded. They're just not live. But people seem to really relax. It's amazing when they don't think they're on television, how much more they open up. So it is an artificial situation.
And you've asked about the guests. Now, both Marcia and I have over the years done the show when we were both really sick.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there have been those times where you tell the guest, if I fall off or faint, you get to take the live show. And we've both done that.
I have a great appreciation now doing this once a week or once every other week, depending on the schedule, for those anchors that have to do this day in and day out when they're not feeling well, because it is hard. It is difficult.
You talked about the web extra, which I think is a wonderful addition to Dialogue. I really do. And I think you're right, Marcia. The feel of a web extra is sometimes so different from the regular show, for whatever reason. But let's talk about this thing called social media, which really is taking the world by storm. First of all, what is it, and how is it going to change your show?
Well, you already know, because you've got more than 4,000 fans of Outdoor Idaho on Facebook. So
But we're coming up on Twitter.
Huh?
We're coming up on Twitter.
Oh yeah, we're getting you on Twitter.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a way of connecting people with not only us but with each other.
So we're
and-
talking
but
Facebook and Twitter. And
YouTube, but it's
YouTube.
and it's also a way to get people to come back to us. We don't take email questions live on the air on Dialogue because sometimes they tend to be long and it's hard to bring them into the conversation. But we can take them before the show on Facebook, and I will often I'll get 6 or 7 emails or Facebook questions on a topic beforehand, and it's a great way for someone who is going to watch the show on demand, which you can do on our website and watch it later, and they want to get their question in, they don't want to call in live, they can do that. So it's another way to interact with the audience.
Speaking of that, this was a question that came in via email to me to ask you, do you foresee a day when live call-in is completely replaced with email questions?
I like the human voice. I like the call that comes in, and if nothing else, it adds a sense of danger, because in the sense of unknown, that actually that's kind of the fun of live television, because it's live. I mean, unless it's a specifically a taped program, it's live. So if I forget a word or if something calls, it kind of adds another element of granted my level of excitement maybe my excitement level would be a little off, but that is one thing. But I don't think it'll replace it. I don't know what you think, Marcia.
I don't know. Here's the thing. Appointment television is kind of going by the wayside. In other words, people actually sitting by the TV set at a certain time. So I think more and more people are wanting to watch things on demand, which is the great thing about our website. We stream all of our video. We also put it up on YouTube, and we link to it from Facebook. And so I think that while there will always be some people who will still want to get their voice on the air. And by the way, we find more men who want to do this than women for some reason want to call in. I think we will see an increase in people wanting to interact electronically, and I in some ways like that as well, because you can actually shorten the question a little bit and think about it and wind it in where you want it to go. And I would encourage people to email us with questions and go to Facebook with questions, because we often are able to get those questions in when we can't get the phone calls in, where there's not enough time. It's easier for me to read a question and get in, and so you have a higher probability of getting your question asked.
What do you think the future holds for these kinds of shows like Dialogue, the single topic, in-depth show with experts? Is there a place for this in our world? I mean, I'm hoping that there is.
I think both of us are probably hoping that there's.
Is there any evidence out there that Dialogue is making a difference?
Well, those are actually two different questions. I think there's evidence that dialogue makes a difference just because of the viewer feedback we get. People talk about an issue, or will comment on it, or we'll hear a lawmaker mention it. Sometimes from the floor, they'll mention a comment or something that broke as a result of the discussion. And I think anytime you can bring people together and inform people and help bring light to a subject, there's always going to be a need for that. And so I think dialogue does make a difference, and I think there is a need for it. And so far, we're still here.
I would agree with that, and I think these other platforms have been very intriguing. For instance, YouTube counts how many views you have, and I've been astonished. I mean, some of the programs, for instance, I did a program with Frank McCourt that we re-aired when he passed away, and we just put it up on YouTube. I mean, I've lost track, but I want to say hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of views. A program I did with a former UN person high up in the UN, over 1,000 views. So I think there's a real need. People want to see substantive programming where people are not talking over each other. They're being respectful, and we're trying to parse issues for them that are very complex. But I do think we'll increasingly see that moving to other platforms. Yes, but I do think there's a need. I hope there's a need because I want to stay employed.
And let's end with this question. What are the big topics out there that you folks know are going to be topics of discussion on future dialogues?
Well, I think we're going to see the economy is going to be number one for a while. I think you'll see. I'm hopeful that the economic indicators, I get that word out, are showing that Idaho will probably get out of this recession starting 2012. And so that I think until then, that's going to be a big domination. I think green energy is also going to be a big topic here in Idaho and the West. So I think there's energy issues that are going to keep up. And the wolf will always be with us. Will always be a topic. And people always ask, what show got the most questions? And that's bear baiting.
Bear baiting.
Baiting was the show that got the most questions of any dialogue program.
And Governor Bad as well. But but bear baiting. Definitely environmental topics will always be top of the docket. I agree with Joan about the economy, and I think healthcare. Obviously, some of these. It's interesting. They're hard to do for television. They're really substantive topics. We also have an election year coming up, and I think both of us pride ourselves on trying to keep people up to date on what's happening in that arena. Idaho is changing demographically, so I think you're going to see more programs that reflect that. At least I hope so, And we would really love to take dialogue on the road a few times a year out of the studio to communities themselves. For instance, communities that are dealing with these economic issues. How are they dealing with them? How are they staying alive? Because it's often in times like this that the most innovation comes out. And Idahoans are known for being independent and entrepreneurs. So I think it would be great to take dialogue out to the people.
Wonderful. Well, Joan, Marcia, as a citizen of Idaho, I thank you for your 15 years of service on Dialogue, and I hope we have many more years. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Both of you.
Thank you.